Welcome to another edition of Breaking News brought to you by Source Selection Soundbites. Today, we will discuss the case of Computer Universal Inc., or CUI, decided by the General Accountability Office, or GAO. The agency had a requirement to install the Korean Vehicle Tracking System, or KVTS, on its buses in South Korea. The contracting officer contacted CUI and Wintech by telephone and issued an oral request for quotations, or RFQ, pursuant to the simplified acquisition procedures set forth in the Federal Acquisition Regulation, in which the CO requested that CUI and Wintech provide a detailed quotation of what work and costs would be required to reestablish the operability of the KVTS. This oral RFQ was followed up by an email in which CUI and Wintech were instructed to include the proposed cost of the overall effort, noting that the price must be complete, and factor in whatever costs required to reestablish operability. CUI's and Wintech's total evaluated prices were $27,000 and $23,900, respectively. Since Wintech had the lowest price, it received the award. When CUI learned of the agency's actions, it protested. CUI contends that its $20,000 quotation to make the KVTS operable was all-inclusive and included all necessary telecommunications charges, as evidenced by the fact that the quotation included the acquisition of new cell phone lines and testing, which could only be accomplished if there was an active telecommunications service. CUI states that its quotation clearly indicated that the requested $7,000 increase in monthly telecommunications charges on its maintenance contract was completely separate from this work, and that this charge would take effect after the system was made operable and the repair work was completed. CUI contends that it therefore provided the lowest priced quotation and should have received the purchase order. The agency claims that telecommunications services were necessary to test and demonstrate the operability of the KVTS, and that it added the $7,000, which was taken from the same price schedule containing CUI's $20,000 quotation to make the system operable, to account for these costs, because the government also had to identify the cost of telecommunications within the CUI quotation in order to ensure that CUI had presented a viable proposal of reestablishing operability and testing of the KVTS. Given that CUI's quotation did not specifically indicate that such costs were included. En route to finding against the agency, the GAO noted that CUI's claim that the costs for necessary telecommunications were included in its $20,000 lump sum quotation is consistent with its emails and quotation, given that the quotation expressly included the acquisition of new cell phone lines and testing of the system, which could not be done without an active telecommunications service. In addition, CUI's quotation clearly indicated that the additional $7,000 figure used by the agency in the evaluation was not the total monthly telecommunications charges, but was a proposed increase to the monthly communications charges under CUI's maintenance contract, and that this proposed increase was not related to CUI's quotation to make the system operable. Our review reveals no reasonable basis for the agency to assume that the $7,000 increase referred to in CUI's quotation represented the cost of telecommunications that would be needed to make the system operable under the purchase order. Given these facts, the protest is sustained. Now let's address a few of the lessons learned from this protest. They include: 1. Oral presentations may be executed under the simplified acquisition procedures under certain thresholds. 2. When an oral solicitation is issued, the agency may follow up with an email to provide additional details. And 3. Once an oral solicitation is issued, all other source selection rules apply. In this episode of Source Selection Soundbites, we discussed the CUI case and the nuances of oral presentations when using simplified acquisition procedures. This concludes today's Source Selection Soundbite. If this video was helpful, hit the like and subscribe button to ensure you don't miss any new material. If you want more details on the subject, they are available on the Source Selection Answer app. It contains lectures, quizzes, court cases, sample documents, and more material that allows practitioners to quickly obtain actionable knowledge. Thanks for watching. See you next time.